Welcome, everybody, to the Indie Game Lunch Hour. Today, we're talking about staying optimistic in the face of a struggling game industry.
The Indie Game Lunch Hour.
Welcome, everybody, to our live magical podcast where we give game developers the chance to hear stories of breaking in from industry experts, as well as directly ask them questions about their areas of expertise in the second half of each episode. As always, I'm your host here, Willem Delventhal, the headmaster at the Indie Game Academy, and I am excited today to be introducing a community lecture on a subject that feels dearly needed in today's day and age. As always, by the way, we're here every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern, so feel free to swing by and join us for the next one. Today, though, is a community episode, which means we're all discussing together rather than having one particular guest of honor. And today's topic is one I've actually been wanting to talk about, so I'm glad that we are jumping into it. And that is staying optimistic in the face of our struggling game industry. I have a couple of kind of depressing stats for everyone here. One of the very first ones is how much the industry has grown in the past couple of years. So for reference, when we look at year-over-year growth for an industry, we are trying to beat inflation is really the biggest thing. An industry that grows by about 8 or 9% is a really healthy industry. An industry that grows by 4 or 5% is an industry that's kind of staying stagnant because it's mostly matching inflation. And an industry that grows any less than that is really honestly falling. For the past 3 years, we have seen industry growth rates less than 4%. In 2020, our year-over-year growth rate was 23%, which is an insane number. That's a ton of growth, but that's, of course, because of the pandemic and the fact that everybody was locked inside. And ever since, we've just been sloughing off talent because people have been playing fewer and fewer games as they've gone back outside and as the economy has become a little bit more questionable. In 2021, if remembering my stats right, it was about a 2% growth, followed by 1% growth, followed by just a 0.6% growth in 2023, which once again, compared to inflation, means it's actually failing. It's actually falling down. Now, I don't say that, hopefully, to depress anybody. I say that because it's really important to know the stats. We've also seen about 180,000 layoffs in the past couple of years. In the games industry itself, we've all seen how many, the crazy number of layoffs that have been happening. And we've, of course, seen political turmoil here in the US, which has extended out to many other countries. I'm so sorry about that. And as a result, I can feel the struggle. So many people are just a little sad, a little scared, definitely anxious. And not exactly sure about their future in the game industry or their future period. And I feel that myself. So I figured a community-oriented episode where we're all talking together about how to stay optimistic in such crazy times would be a welcome episode. If you have your own tips about optimism, I'd love to hear them down below. Before we even get anywhere, though, I'd like to bring up our first community guest of the day, which is Wendy, one of our moderators here and a wonderful student. And I want to start with the subject of what is the appropriate level of optimism? That, I think, is something that is sort of a juicy subject on its own. Before then, though, Wendy, hi, welcome to the show.
Going.
I'm doing okay. How you doing? Doing as good as I can.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's Women in Games Conference Day, so just super, I'm buzzing today, and I haven't even had any coffee, so just running on the natural adrenaline, so good, perfect topic.
Hey, that's great. I'm glad to hear it. I am buzzing from coffee specifically, so I'm glad we're both buzzing. It means it's going to be a good segment here.
Right.
So Wendy, before anything else, let's get sort of your mini origin story. What do you do in games, and how'd you get there?
Well, my tagline literally, I think on Xbox or something, or God, it may even be MySpace, dating myself, or something. It was gaming since Pong. Now I'm hoping most here at least know of Pong. Maybe didn't play it like I did, but it was like what was it, in television or
In television, yeah.
Yep. I think is where I played it on those paddle controllers. Those were interesting.
Mm-hmm.
People complain about drift and stuff now. But anyway, so I just always been interested in games, and it was harder being a girl, I guess, although I'd forget at times because I was more of a tomboy, finding others to play. So oddly, I'd, find more guy friends that played, and just kept going with it and just realized like, oh, I could actually maybe like make something myself someday. So, just talked with others, went into education, thought I was going to be a teacher for a while. Similar to you, thought about designing educational games.
Hmm.
I thought maybe that could be a thing, merge those things. Then realized college and paying for college and stuff was a thing. So just went into like technical support, and I'm still seeking therapy for that. But it was good, a lot of good transferable skills. And now more recently in the last few years, I've been moderating for not just Indie Game Academy, but Amir's Discord,
Hmm.
and just trying to engage wherever I can. Um, Now, most recently on my first ever real team in level 3, if you can
Woo!
see my face, I'm like hiding under a blankie a little bit, but it's very exciting, and I'm looking forward to the next 4 months.
Amazing. Yes. Yeah. So Wendy has been a longtime moderator for us and a longtime community member, and only just recently joined the Level 3 program, which is our 4-month-long boot camp where you join an interdisciplinary team and launch a game together to a story of your choice. And of course, you get some publisher feedback and stuff like that. It's a great program. And Wendy, I'm so happy that you're a part of it. All right, so let's chew into this thing, Wendy. I would like to start, like I said, with the topic of what is the appropriate level of optimism. In my life, I have generally stayed an incredibly optimistic person. I tend to believe that optimism is better than the alternative, and that optimism is almost like a prerequisite to any kind of success. You have to believe it's possible before it actually tends to happen. That said, I've also seen, of course, the negative sides of optimism and blind optimism. One of my more important learning moments was when I ran my indie studio and brought our game Tailmore to Kickstarter. And I actually kind of lost a relationship with my brother because I was too optimistic. I was pushing us into believing that we were going to make about $150,000, which is on Kickstarter, which was our internal goal. Externally, we were telling everyone that we were going to hit 30,000, that was the actual goal. That's very par for the course on Kickstarter. And to be totally honest, that optimism wasn't really based on metrics. That was me going, we can do it, look at how other games do it, and sort of blindly following my optimistic instincts. As a result, when we hit about $30,000, which is still, decent, we got to ship our game, but of course is a far cry from 150K. It really depressed my brother and actually got him quite upset at me because he felt like I personally had misled him using my optimism. I also think in the face of a more dangerous, scary time period like we're in right now, optimism can come across as kind of stale or tasteless or something like that. So, Wendy, what is your opinion on the appropriate level of optimism, or perhaps where optimism gets used?
Such a good question. I think back to my mom. She would say that I was a happy baby. And I try to imagine this. And she's given me pictures, much to my chagrin. That just bringing positivity was enough. And sometimes that's true. I guess we could talk about the difference between optimism and positivity, but this isn't a psychologist, centric episode. But
Hmm.
um, I think depending on the situation, some's better than none. I'm with you that it's better than the alternative for sure.
Hmm.
And I think you learn to read the room, if you will. Sometimes the craziness, the quirky. I'm gonna throw Haley in here. Is exactly what you need.
Hmm.
And sometimes you need a more measured thing. I will say, I guess, in my current role, I work in higher education. I can't always pull as much as I might want to, and maybe think in my mind, what would Haley do in this moment? I have to bring a more, professional, balance that out somewhat. So I say the appropriate level of optimism is based a lot on your personality and where you're at, who you are talking to.
That's great. Yeah, I think that's a decent answer. The answer, well, it depends, is applies in so many cases.
Right.
Absolutely. I think so. This is sort of a tangent, but not at all. We've also in recent years we've spent a lot of effort to talk about how important diversity is in gaming, and how different types of game developers deliver different games and deliver different skills to the same games, and how that in the end results in better games. I think it's kind of similar with optimism. It's actually really useful. Something I eventually learned about my brother in particular is that he tends to be much more pessimistic. And for a while, I hated that. It drove me kind of crazy. I would talk about the possibilities and he would talk about the problems. But eventually, at some point, I realized that actually was wonderful to have both of those voices on the team. When I join a team, lead a team, and part of a team, I almost always bring optimism, and I almost always bring. I spend effort to bring people together and to make it feel like a cohesive team, and that is of real value that I bring where I go. What he does is he makes sure that the team is being realistic and has problems pointed out to them. So I like just, well, it kind of depends on the person as the first answer to this question. So let's say, though, for us, the hyper optimistic, what's the appropriate level there? Is there a space or a time for sort of blind optimism where you just talk about, hey, don't worry, one day it'll be better? Or is that always wrong? Should it be more of a sort of cautious optimism like Misha mentions in chat, or a logical optimism as you're mentioning right now? What is the appropriate level for the optimistic among us? Or at least what do you think it is?
You know, I would like to say for me, and I guess that's probably my answer, is it depends on you. What feels good to you, what are your values? I know people, I would call Williman amongst them that just bring it. Just you already exude it, so you could be quiet and you're already bringing the positive, just eternal optimism, which keeps me and I'm sure many others here.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I would say, like in my significant other, he's more of a logical optimist, I would say. So for him, if he were to do that, it would come off fake, I would guess. And it would be pretty awkward for both parties involved or all parties involved. But for him, he's the most caring person. He would do anything for anybody. So I'd say that's optimism for him. So, no, I don't, I would say no, not, blind optimism for everybody, but you could bring that vibe. I think everybody can bring that vibe still.
Yeah, that's great. I think, and by the way, for those who are live with us in the Discord, feel free to drop questions. In community-oriented episodes, we'll pull out questions immediately. So if you have any questions on the subject or thoughts on the subject, put it in the chat and we'll call it out. I think I mostly agree with that. I think there is a time and a place for blind optimism. And I think when that tends to fit best is actually in the darkest hour. I think it's never good to just ignore the important stuff. I think it's never good to be like, well, I'm sure the marketing will just go fine. I'm sure there will be buyers. I'm sure that we'll find investment. I think that that's basically 100% dangerous to just assume that the runway will continue, that buyers will appear, that money will be made. I think that is not really where optimism belongs. But I do think that when we're talking about morale, especially, and then just like culture, optimism almost always has a place. And I think it actually has more of a place when it's kind of dark, where you can be a sort of shelter for your teammates, for the other people in your communities, and tell them that everything will be okay. That's my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, I would. I think early on, 20 years ago, I might have said, yeah, blind optimism just all over, because a lot of times I had so much other stuff going on. I had to at least bring that. And that was my default, blind optimism. Now, a lot of times some people would have to talk me down. I don't mean necessarily being less optimistic, but just, hey, we need some realism here. Don't forget, there are this or that or the other thing going on. So, I think my default is that. So I would tend to agree. If I'm not even thinking about it, I'm hopefully probably bringing that. But, it really does depend on the situation. I know I hate those gray answers or, like, oh, it depends and whatever, but that's what I'm going with.
Yeah, I think how have I started using it? Somebody said cautious optimism earlier. Misha, I think, said cautious optimism. I tend to use like a realistic optimism when I describe how I tend to exist. I think you should always believe that the incredible outcomes are possible. You should always believe that that's real, but you should also be realistic about the chances. So it shouldn't be we're going to land that amazing investor. It should be the chances of us landing that amazing investor are only 5 to 10%, but let's be optimistic about hitting that 5 to 10%. Because I think what optimism brings to the table, and I think this will be our next big subject, I'm going to call you up in a second, Juice, is it brings like energy. Optimism is sort of fuel. It keeps morale high and it keeps people able to keep moving forward despite the fact that odds may not actually be good.
Yeah. I think that my last thing I would say before we leave this one too would be, one thing I think I've grown and it's been most helpful to me to maintain what I like to be and, rainbows and unicorns and, positivity and helping everybody is to maintain that level of, always optimism, but do something meaningful that you can sustain it down the road. So if I'm talking with somebody a week down the line, I want to be able to say we're continuing, that we're actually making meaningful progress. So maybe that's just a spark, that we began with, but we're continuing it on so that real world change, if that's what's needed, can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think all progress, right? This is one of those like super common tropey, cliche statements, but honestly, it's true. All progress is not linear. It is always a back and forth, and even the darkest times in our history didn't last too long. All right, we've brought Juice to the stage. Wendy, you're still welcome to jump in if you ever have any thoughts. We're going to leave you on stage. But my next subject is basically the benefits of optimism. How does optimism fit into a team? And what does it actually bring to the table? Before we get there, Juice, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for being here, for letting me be here.
Of course.
So my name is Juice, or people call me Juice. Actually, my name is Joseph. In Swedish, it is almost Juice, so that's why. I've been in the programming industry ever since 2011 somewhere. When I started to do some programming stuff. I've been working for Ericsson and those kinds of IT companies until about 2018 when I started my own indie company, and that actually touches on the optimism part because I'm basically the same as you. I'm super optimistic. I'm just throwing myself headfirst into stuff, and then I realize, crap, I should have taken a bit. A
little dose of realism. Yeah,
exactly. That's why I also married my wife, which basically bitch slaps me. Oh, sorry. She is more of a realist than I am. Yeah, so basically I've been working as a programmer indie since 2018. I've been doing stuff for King on the Candy Crush stuff and those kinds of like, mobile games and console.
Amazing. Awesome.
Yeah.
And how did you let's do that like mini origin story for a second. So how did you actually get started? You're working at King is a great opportunity. Working in this space is awesome. How did you get started doing what you do?
Locally here in Linköping, where I live, there were no gaming companies, so I decided to go my own way, and that is how I started off.
Okay, so India was first.
Exactly.
Nice.
So I started to do contracting work, and that's what I came into King and doing those kinds of things.
Awesome.
So
Just a small call out for everyone here. Absolutely, that's wonderful. One of the reasons that we push so hard for indie founding is because it's the one thing that's within your control. If you want a game industry job, you can make one today. I cannot promise you a salary, but you can absolutely get the experience. And then secondarily, just to call it out for those who are starting or in the process of starting an indie studio, the vast majority of indie studios that I have heard of that have continued and have lived for any prolonged period of time have done contract labor as a huge part of where they're making money, at least at the beginning. So small call outs for anyone looking to found. So Juice, let's talk about optimism's benefits and where it really fits in a team. So what do you believe are the reasons to have optimism on a team?
Yeah, you were touching on some of the aspects. One of which would be like just morale, getting people to jump on the train, right? We subconsciously want to be around people who are positive, who have something that we lack. We are curious by nature, so we want to get a piece of that, right? So I think people who are really optimistic are people who can get other people to motivated to do stuff. When I do leadership, when I have leadership roles, I usually just use gamification or game theory and get people motivated by giving them rewards of different kinds, like titles that are really out there. We had someone. I was lead for someone who's really introverted. Like he could not do anything, and he was really shy about his code that he was writing. So a really small example of that would be just to I added titles where when you did something good, when you did something great, you could actually get titles, even if you did something wrong.
Okay.
And that guy was really good with money, so we actually ended up calling him the Mafia Boss because he was really he was really good with like. I don't know how to express it in English, but he was really great with handling the cash. So everyone was just throwing things at him. Hey, could you do this for us? And he was really fast with it. And he started to blossom because of these kinds of things, like just motivational things by just encouraging people to do stuff, right? So optimism is a great part of that. And I've also had a lot of people just telling me, "Hey, why do you do this? Why are you starting the indie studio? Like, how dare you? What if you fail?" And for like, every time someone asked me that, I was like, "Why? What if I don't fail? Like, why wouldn't I want, right?" And my way of life, I would say, would be when I'm 90 years old, looking down on my body when I'm dying slowly, and my soul is leaving my my mouth through my mouth, and like looking down upon the soulless body. I wonder to myself, "Hey, have I done everything that I could have done?" And that is what guides me. And I think, to touch on what you were saying, that is what the biggest benefits of optimism is. You live a fulfilled life.
Yeah. Well, I'm so happy we had you here on stage, Juice. What a wonderful, what a wonderful bit for us. A wonderful couple of points for us. I'm curious, what are some of those titles that they could earn, by the way, before we continue?
Yeah, so Mafia Boss was one of them. It was basically just a spur of the moment. So whenever someone did something cool, you could just get in something. We had the hit and run guy. He was always looking at his phone, and he just bumped into everyone. So he was the hit and run guy. Yeah, those are just two of the titles I can remember. Like, this was way back.
I love that. That's great. Yeah. So something that you said towards the end there, the people who say like, "How dare you?" when you start an indie studio. I think that's something that those who try always experience.
Sorry, I can't hear anything.
Oh, can y'all still hear me? The audience here? I think they can. Okay. Juice. Something.
Sorry.
Yeah. Something that this makes me think of, though, towards the end there, you said people like almost said, "How dare you?" for starting indie studios. And that's something that I think anybody who's really tried something sort of audacious will experience to some degree. I tend to get far more like encouragement than I get discouragement. So I will say that for anyone who's thinking of starting, don't worry, you'll get more people patting you on the back, in general anyway, in my experience, than you will telling you you suck or can't do it. But you definitely get some people who say you suck or can't do it. Absolutely. And I just want to give this one little piece to everybody out there because it has meant a lot to me. Brene Brown is a well-known author of a number of different books, but they tend to be kind of in the self-help category. And one of her books is called Dare to Lead. And towards the beginning of that book, she has this wonderful sentiment, which is, "I am not interested in listening to the opinions of anybody who is not in the arena too." If somebody isn't going after it themselves, then they frankly don't really understand the situation you're in, and their opinion doesn't really matter. It's wonderful to get the pats on the back, but if you just have people, you will get critics and you will get trolls. And learning to ignore those people is very important. That's a part of optimism into and of itself, keeping the optimism alive. I love so many of the things that you brought up there, Juice, though, as far as the power of optimism. I have slowly in my own career been working my way into design management. For the first time, I am a design manager at Mod Collective right now. And as a result, I've really been trying to absorb these exact lessons. How do I keep my team interested, motivated, and morale high? And I think optimism, at least for me, is one of the keys to that puzzle. Making the team just feel excited and optimistic about the future of what could be is really important and really powerful for keeping them engaged and excited, especially in an industry like the game industry, where the end product becomes so much better if the team is just having a fun time while they're making it. I believe optimism is all the more important in this industry as a result. If I'm sure some of us here have worked on projects where we really weren't excited, or we really didn't believe in the project, or we just had a bunch of conflict on the team and we were stressed out or whatever, we weren't actually having a fun time. And we tend to give second-rate work in those situations. We tend to be like, I'm just going to get this done. I'm not going to worry about it. If instead we're having a good time, we're having fun, we feel listened to, we feel value, and in general we have an optimistic viewpoint of what this product or company could become, we tend to give much better work. That's sort of a transactionary way to look at it, perhaps, but that's also a gift that you're giving to your team when you bring optimism. It just feels better to be in that environment. I'm curious, since we have Wendy on stage, what are your thoughts on the positive benefits of optimism?
Oh, if I had more medical knowledge, I would talk about, dopamine and all that kind of stuff, but definitely don't have that. But I think anybody could get that, you were talking when you were talking about teams, whether I'm in Discord here or on my, day job teams, I'm always that person, no surprise, you know, using all the gifts and emojis and whatever and balancing it where needed, when I've had jobs where you definitely don't do that. People are just like look down upon you. At least that's how I perceive it. And then I decide that's probably not the place for me because I get being professional, but there's also you just got to be you. You know what I mean? What was your original question? Sorry, I went away on a tangent and then totally forgot.
That's totally fine. So just the positive benefits of optimism. Where does optimism make your teams better? In game development or outside of it as well?
Well, getting you through hard times, I guess I would say on both. I'm anticipating as I'm going through this level 3, the challenges that, I'll face. I'm glad we're building a strong foundation with our team because that'll get us through it with the help of our amazing prefect and others that are supporting us. And I could say that outside of game development too. I've been through some, as I'm sure many of us have, some challenging things. You just had my father-in-law was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and so we're navigating that, and kind of what kinds of things. And I think the positivity that we've already established is carrying us through, trying to be as real as possible and finding out as much as we can about it in the midst of also having things like level 3 and other stuff that you got to go on. So I think the benefits it has, I don't even know if you really recognize it unless you stop and take a look at it.
Absolutely. I'm so sorry to hear about what's happening, but I wish you very much well, and I wish you very much optimism during that time period. Absolutely. Yeah, I think optimism is really, this is something that I've said to myself, especially in in recent months. The optimism to me is the ultimate defiance, actually, the ultimate act of defiance. When the world is dark and full of terror, you saying, I don't care, I still believe it's possible. That is true defiance. That is you saying, I will continue despite this. Now, despite that, let's talk for a second. We're going to do two more sort of major topics. The first one here is going to be the negative sides of optimism and where it doesn't belong. And then lastly, we'll talk about building optimism and different techniques we have as a community for doing so. So, Juice, tell me about the negative sides of optimism. Where does it not fit?
Oh, that is a good question. So you wouldn't want to have an optimistic. You actually touched on this previously when you said that in marketing, for instance, you really want to have a realistic view when it comes to sales and those kinds of things. I definitely went way too far ahead and had to backtrack, go back, take another turn a few times when it comes to the game that I was developing. So yeah, you're wasting a lot of time learning things along the way. You correct those mistakes and then you just continue on, right? So I just took that basically and made an optimistic version of it. Just like my child is calling for me. Sorry.
That's
I'll
okay.
go back.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think optimism, it's interesting. I think a dose of optimism can fit in most places. But I also think that there are a couple of places where you have to be cautious about your optimism. I think anything project management and planning is one of those places. Don't be optimistic about how much you can get done in a period of time. In fact, I think that's a perfect place for pessimism. For you to be like, yeah, we could probably do this in 2 months, but I think it'll take 8.
Yeah, definitely in time management.
Yes. Sorry, Juice.
No, go ahead.
I think someone mentioned measured optimism. I think that's where if you don't know enough, management is a good example there. If you don't know enough about the situation or maybe even the person, try to find out more before you spew out all the I'm thinking of the rainbow puking emojis, the gifts that you see from people. Before I start vomiting out some optimism, maybe get a little bit more information. Then it's going to have more impact, I think.
Yeah. Oh. I have something going on in the background. I think one of my fire alarms is going off. I gotta go check on that. This is an interesting episode.
Please go
While I'm gone, for the sake of those who are listening, can I get some thoughts on your different techniques for building optimism? And I'm going to leave that to you, Juice, while I go check on my fire alarm. How do you build optimism?
All right. So I would be answering this question, or am I supposed to like just drive the thing? I would like to ask you, Wendy, in terms of solo project or things that you're talking about, that you had the level 3 things, that I assume that there is through your project that you have these kinds of, how do you say, meetings that you basically just play around, right? In my experience, what we've done is we build optimism through trust, right? So we do these kinds of activities where you just, without any assumptions or without any requirements, just hang out with each other, play games together, go through things in a tough situations or whatever together, right? So you build up to trust, and when you build the trust, you can also build the optimistic views of things. Like you don't just spit out, hey, we can get through this. You actually have to work through this together, and getting people in on the same level, basically, right? Would that be the same for you? Do you have similar experiences in those regards?
Yeah, I would say. And first, we were going to check and make sure Willem's okay. So everything's all good.
Yeah,
everything's all good. I recently moved into a new place that has very old smoke detectors, and they have some kind of feature where, like, when one of them goes off, they trigger all of them to go off. Like, I think they listen for each other's sounds. So nothing at all is wrong. They all just decided to go off during the podcast episode, so that's good.
It's literally on fire. You're going to put that in the title, right?
yeah. Okay. Such a hot episode that Willem's house caught on flames.
It's so hot. Yep. Yeah, Juice was just asking and positioned a really good question about, experiences and, how I think the role that trust plays in it, if I was understanding it right. And I think that's exactly right. From, what I was talking about with level 3, the first couple times we met as a team, and I even commented that to the team. I said, hey, just as a reflection, I really appreciate having this, getting to know you and kind of a trust building, first before we did anything else. Because then I feel like any optimism that comes from that is more authentic, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
So even just in a short time and only known most of these people, maybe, a week or two, I think that trust played a really strong role in that. And I think we would have gotten there anyway without that, but having that trust made it more solid, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can absolutely agree. I think one of the ways that optimism and the lack of trust don't really mix is if you don't trust somebody, then the optimism winds up feeling inauthentic or flat. And I think we've all experienced that. Especially, I think like one of the things I'm careful of is, or I've been trying to be more careful of, is optimism can lead you into like promise traps where you're like, oh yeah, I can do that, or oh yeah, we'll get to that, or oh yeah, this is going to happen. And the more of those promises you make that get broken, where we don't hit them because we were too optimistic, the less the optimism's potency becomes. People stop trusting you and therefore stop listening to the optimism. I'm going to bring Misha up on stage as our third guest, and then we're going to talk about techniques for building optimism. Welcome, Misha. How are you doing today?
I'm okay. Just kind of preparing my day and kind of, trying to keep the balls rolling.
Absolutely, yes. So, Misha, let's do our mini intro. Tell us about what you do in games and how you got started.
Yeah, currently, I'm promoting myself as a freelance 3D artist. I have experience in animation. I think it was 2018, I graduated from game design school. And then since then, I had just kind of started building some work experience through small freelance gigs and putting myself out there on Discord, especially. And just basically, fast forward to 2023, my contract ended in an animation studio where I worked there for a year. And then now, since then, I've just transitioned to getting more game experience, especially with various freelance projects and contributions, including Project Titan, which was with Epic Games and Unreal Engine. And just basically kind of, like I said, just trying to keep the balls rolling in my favor and keep networking with people.
Amazing.
And then, just basically living in a city that's quite expensive, which is Vancouver in Canada. It can be very exhausting, but I'm not going to go into that.
All right, we'll keep on the optimistic side for today. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you for hopping on, Misha. You have always been somebody that I think is a great example of continuing to grab that contract work and look for that contract work. There's always you've got so many different projects that you've contributed to in the past couple of years.
Absolutely, and that's why. With that said, I'm very grateful, Willem, for allowing me to contribute to the level 3 thing a couple of years ago. Because I've really made some good friends out of that, and yes, I will definitely be continuing to, keep networking with this community because it really has fostered a sense of positive optimism for me. So, point there.
Thank you, Misha. Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the most important things that I and we, the Indie Game Academy, try to bring to this industry. All right, so we're coming to the end of the time. Let's start with you, Misha. I want to start with optimism tools, techniques, practices. So, Misha, when you're feeling a lack of optimism, what are some of the things that you do to try to bring the optimism back?
Yeah, there's quite a few things. It really all depends because just as I casually texted in the chat yesterday, I only had $34 in my bank account, but just it's been very rough for me. I only work part-time in grocery. That's why I have to kind of hustle the rest of the week on my game projects and networking. And so that's kind of one way I kind of breed my optimism, and just remembering both my strengths and my passions, which outside of video games animation, I've also grown up with a huge passion for cars and automobiles. So for me, I feel like one advice I can offer is if anyone else here aside has any other huge growing passions that they love that maybe also foster their interest towards games, keep holding on to those and see if you can build out your niche through that as well, and maybe build your community. Because I also went to an in-person networking event yesterday with a bunch of community leaders, and that really helped boost my optimism, knowing that, hey, I see other people being successful and they just do simple enough things. How can I approach it the same kind of way, but in my own fashion?
Amazing. Yeah, those things that remind us of the passion and remind us of the optimism, because optimism doesn't stem from nowhere. I do think that a blind optimism where it's just like, I'm optimistic all the time about everything, I think that winds up feeling very inauthentic very quick. So we tend to have those kernels that make us optimistic. So I, for instance, really just absolutely love video games as an art form. And so it makes me passionate to see other people express that art form and move into this art form. I also believe that the video game industry as a whole can be a wonderful source of truth and optimism for the rest of the world, for the rest of the industries, because we are such weirdos here. And I think we can bring that to the world.
Absolutely.
Both of those things give me a great sense of optimism. So doing those small things in our lives that remind us of the missions, of the optimism, are absolutely potent. I love, for instance, bringing myself to solo movie nights. I love going to the movies on my own and just sitting and watching something dumb and eating popcorn and Junior Mints. That's my go-to combo.
Nice. Yeah, and it's funny too, as someone who's a bit single right now, but networking with people, it's always comforting to try to find a chance to just peacefully be with yourself, right? And maybe look at yourself in the mirror and say, who am I right now? Who do I want to be in the future? Because maybe once you kind of keep that vision in your head of who you aspire to be, then that will also help. Even though I know many people cliche say, oh, fake it to make it. Well, maybe fake it for yourself, but just try to be authentic in the real world when you're talking to other people, right? But
Hmm.
I also realize, like I mentioned with cautious optimism, even when applying to jobs, I have to account for Murphy's Law where anything can and will happen. So with that said, it's like, okay, yes, absolutely, I would love to get an interview, but I'm not going to fully put all my chips on the table for that,
Hmm.
because I know there's plenty of other people that might want to apply for that job, right?
Hmm. Yeah, I'm loving the concept cautious optimism. I'm really liking the term measured optimism because it implies like a careful sense of optimism, but a little bit more sort of like tactical. Now, Wendy, I know you have a million techniques about how to stay optimistic. I'd love to hear some of yours.
Sure. Actually, in the chat, I put the list because I wasn't sure if we'd get time to it. But
Hmm.
I would say, going back to my values, and this is something I have to remind myself often, is one way.
Hmm.
Playing games, and later on, spoiler, there'll be more playing games. I just sometimes will, remember where my North Star is, I guess, if you will. Like, especially
Hmm.
if we're talking about game development, and more recently, from a tip from I think level 1 is starting a game design journal. So going back to that, helping others in general, just so like engaging in Discord, things like that, helping others, if I can help somebody else get to where they want to be, it's like, again, that dopamine hit. The boring things like exercise, yoga and cycling for me, the things you got to do, and having a list of things that I enjoy. I mean, oddly, when things get more stressed and more intense, it's weird how quickly you forget the things that you like to do. So just writing those down and then remembering where that list is and making sure it's front of mind, easy to find, are probably some of the top things I'd recommend.
I love that. Yeah, both you and Misha mentioned basically like
Yeah,
knowing who you
agree.
are and what you're aiming for. Love that. Yeah, thank you, Misha. The knowing your core values and your core reasons, your core whys, I think is a potent part of what you're both talking about here. And I think it's worth echoing. Get good sleep, exercise, hang out with your friends, and do the boring stuff because it makes such a huge difference. Oh my god, it really does, though.
When I went to see a psychologist for my ADHD, he
Hmm.
mentioned lemons, and I'll have to see if I can put in like general or something like that, or if I can find, I'll put in the chat here. But it's like lemons, but there's two M's and two S's, and it's like light and exercise and social things and whatever each letter stands for, something anagram or whatever. I'll see if I can find that.
Okay. I
That's funny because it makes me
mhm.
think of life gives you lemons, right? Making lemonade. But
Yep.
then you also consider, okay, what other purposes do these lemons have? Okay,
Mhm.
you can you can squeeze them if you're stressed, or you can make lemonade and sell them. Maybe you can make a battery. I don't know. Kind of like game design. You get mechanics together, and then you come up with a game idea, and boom, there we go.
I
Yep.
love that. Misha, you mentioned something that makes me think of like life as a video game, which tends to work really well for me. The house.
Absolutely.
So I recently bought a
Well, they made a
house.
game called the Game of Life too. Actually, that's the
Yeah,
irony.
that's true. So I recently bought a house, which is tremendously exciting. But the house that I could afford, boy, needs a lot of work. I am currently living in just 2 rooms of the house, and the carpet is about 100 years old, and it smells weird. But and I'm heating it with space heaters. But you know what? Every room that we fix and every little thing that we get functional again, like when I got my toilet working upstairs, is so exciting. It's a video game. It's a progression curve. I'm like, yes, I've unlocked a toilet. Amazing. And same thing for your career. Same thing
Yeah.
for your social life. I feel the same thing. Actually, we've been talking about working out. I've gotten so much joy out of turning working out into a progression, into like pushing specific things instead of just making it like a task I have to do. So actually trying to hit new weights, new exercises, all of that brings a lot of joy too. I think looking at it like it's a game, like it's a progression.
Yeah,
I'd
I
love to,
totally
yeah.
agree.
I'd love to hear, Juice. You had a couple of techniques for your team that you already mentioned, like your titles. Is there anything else that you have brought, specific exercises or activities that you've brought to your teams to increase optimism on them?
Yeah, actually, we do. You already mentioned to you guys a lot of things, like know yourself is one of them, of course.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to myself, I always go back to my 7-year-old child, like, hey, when I was 7 years, what did I want to do out of life? Like, what was my goal, right? And would that 7-year-old child approve of what I'm doing right now? That is something that I constantly do and ask myself. And for the most part, I think that 7-year-old guy would be proud of who I am. When it comes to the actual activities and stuff to do, we had one session where I'd heard a lot of people say a number of negative things going on. It's really easy to be positive and really easy being a good leader when things are going great, right? But when things get stressed out, it's got to be harder. That's when you actually show yourself and your true colors. So what we did was I'd written down a number of lines. I think one of them was like, I don't know how to do this, was one of them. One of them was, I don't have time for this. This is too complicated, and those kinds of things. And I actually challenged the team to, hey, turn this around and write things as from a positive perspective. Like, for instance, the one like, I can't do this, right? One of the solutions to that, one answer to that question was, this is an opportunity for me to grow. Because if you don't know how things are done, that's when you actually have to dig deep, get your hands dirty, and grow from there. So that was one of the techniques that I applied, and I think it was a success at the time. Quite a lot of people turned their things or their thoughts around. They're like, "Hey, this is actually a negative thought. Maybe let me just stop it here and turn the question around."
I love that.
Yeah, that was one of them.
That's great. There's there's two things that I'm aware of that sound very similar to that. There's just the concept of a positive mental attitude at all, and how much that absolutely affects things. There's like scientific evidence that you actually follow your words, and you follow your body language. So if you say like, "Dah, I suck," you will literally suck less. Suck more on average. If you say like, "Oh, I'm so miserable," or "Oh, I'm so stressed," you will literally be more miserable and more stressed. If you bring your posture down and act sad, act morose, you will literally feel more sad and morose. So there is great evidence for just choosing, I'm miserable, but today I'm gonna act like I'm okay. There is actual scientific basis for that. The other thing that I've heard of before that feels like you're alluding to is a fixed versus a growth mindset, which is a wonderful thing to coach yourself into doing. A fixed mindset is a way of talking or thinking where you are not leaving any room for growth. So one of the common ones I hear all the time is, I'm bad at math, or I'm bad at rhythm. Or like, I am very emotional, or there's so many ways that we do this to ourselves. But if you notice, all of those statements don't leave room for growth. I am bad at math, period. That's how it is. That's how it'll always be. Instead, if you try to shift your statements, words, and how you behave to a growth mindset where you are always leaving room for growth, even if you don't pursue it, you are much more likely to receive growth and to gain growth. So instead of saying, I'm bad at math, saying, yeah, I'm not very well practiced at math. And you can see how that statement suddenly is much more open. Or yeah, I don't love dancing. Like, that's fine, but it does still leave room for you to figure out how to love dancing.
Yeah.
Misha?
I just wanted. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Misha.
Yeah.
Well, actually, yeah, you go. You finish your statement, Juice.
All right. I just want to add to that. This is how I talk to my kids. So my daughter actually said this the other day. I don't know how to do math, and I just added one more word. Yet. You don't know yet. Just give it time. Just give it a chance, and then it'll actually turn out. So just add a small, like you were saying, a small tweak to the statement, and you're good to go.
I love that. Awesome. And Misha, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I was going to say too, when it really comes down to it too, I think, sometimes I am very ambitious, and sometimes, when I do want to solve a problem in my life, I know I have to think about it very carefully. And then for me, it's the hardest part is not just solely relying on others to try to solve my problems, but try to find an internal way to do it myself, because I cannot rely on anybody else, right? Maybe I can have some people, cheerlead me, but I can't and then I can have a few people coaching me. But if I'm also spreading myself too thin, you know, then I'm basically like I don't know, a crepe, and it's like, you know, I don't know how else to describe it, but it's like I gotta be, you know, maybe just focus on my top 3 or 4 or 5 things or people that I want to reach out to, especially after going to in-person networking events, and just finding a way to offer compassion to them and just be patient, right? Because for me, I've also learned that the hardest thing in life too to have for yourself is patience after you've made a persistent action and made it very, very carefully, once you understand as well how that action might impact, which in myself can be very challenging too because of my autism. It's so hard to determine if my action will be a positive or a negative, and sometimes I cannot help but perceive it as the negative outcome more often than the positive outcome, you know, especially if even if it's just a sincere little hello, like, or I'm just casually texting someone, hey, how's it going? You know, I can't help but wonder, are they gonna, even if I do it like once a week or something like that, are they gonna be like thinking I'm harassing them or something like that, when in reality I'm just trying to connect with them, you know? And I can't help but feel like people always have their guard up, even when it comes to people that are new or people they don't know. And even me, I've experienced scammers everywhere. So trust is a very, very careful thing, you know, that you have to hold, right, in high regard, because otherwise, if you don't, you know, people take advantage of you, right? And that it can be the worst thing possible, you know?
Yeah, I think it's important to assume the best in people. There are those who will take advantage. In my own experience, I think there are more who are good or at least decent than there are who are crappy. And I think in general, yeah, as you say, it's important to build trust and to know, and when you find those people that you do trust, to hold them close and to value them and to realize that they're a gift. I'd love to, we got to wrap up the episode. So I've got 2 things to do. The first is I'm going to give everyone a homework assignment. And this one I hope will be good. A very simple homework assignment. I would love you to write me a single paragraph about why you are optimistic for any particular subject. Write me a single paragraph about your why and your optimism. What keeps you optimistic? Why are you optimistic? Write me one paragraph. That's it. And then either you can post that on LinkedIn and tag us at the Indie Game Academy or at Willem Delventhal. You can also drop it in the Discord if you're a little bit more nervous about going public with it. Before we say goodbye, I'm going to give each person a chance to leave some final messages. So in 60 seconds, what are your final words of wisdom? Let's go in reverse order. Misha, what are your final words for the listeners in 60 seconds?
Yes. So when it comes to your own personal optimism, yes, take time to just relax, meditate. Self-care is extremely important. And when it comes directly to video games, know that the industry will improve. It just takes time, it takes patience, and it really takes coming together as a community to kind of advocate as best as you can in like the best way possible. Because it's funny how I look at how, like, you know, protests and strikes have happened over the history of the years, and how those have actually in some small ways have impacted the world. So as our game community gets through this, we need to really stand up as a community and just hold hands, you know?
Love that. Yeah, we are a game community. We are all going through this trauma together. This is something that we're all experiencing. Juice, do you have any last words of wisdom? 60 seconds.
And keep
or
making
so?
game jams.
And keep making games. Thank you, Misha. Juice.
Yeah, so my 60 seconds, first and foremost, you guys are awesome. I mean, skills, personality, everything. You are an awesome guy, an awesome person, an awesome,
Thank
like,
you.
just think, not just you, Willem, I mean, everyone here, everyone listening, as individuals, we need to have that for ourselves, right? The gaming industry is just one industry. You have skills that are transferable into other industries, and in case the gaming industry would crash, you are still on your own 2 legs, and you can do a lot of cool things with those. I've been in multiple industries. The medtech industry is probably the most boring one, but I can still be there, right? So just be positive, guys. I believe in you. I believe in we are ourselves in people. I know it's cheesy, but yeah, just big old heart to you guys. Just be positive. I mean, that is all I can say. I mean, just a big old plus.
That's good. Love it. Thank you, Juice. And last one, Wendy, you got a 60-second closing for us?
So we have 60 seconds. That's good. Now I'm going to build on what you said, and take that positivity, take your skills, and offer it to the community. In a safe space like this, or wherever you feel comfortable, because we want to hear and need to hear your contributions. So please put it out there for us.
Love that. Nice, short and sweet. I'm going to say this last piece, and then we'll say goodbye for the day. I'm actually going to call out 2 messages from Petunio in the chat. Petunio says that starting film students are often encouraged to look at making film differently, to go for a bad, low-budget movie instead of blockbusters, because, well, you can do that. I think that's a fantastic sentiment. Don't go looking for making a home run. It's okay if you don't make a home run. Those base hits are progress. And that applies to more than just making games. I'm talking about more than just making games. Home runs feel great. They'll probably happen once or twice in your lifetime. But at best, it's going to be once or twice in your lifetime. So be okay with those base hits. And now I'll call out the second thing by Petunio, which is also know that a legitimate option is failure, and it's not usually that bad. That's a very good point when it comes to optimism. Failure is a part of the journey. You will have ebbs and flows. The game industry itself is having an ebb right now. The Indie Game Academy, for that matter, is having a bit of an ebb right now, along with the industry. It's okay. It happens. It is a lesson to be learned. Optimism is very much a mindset more than anything else. If you can build a resilient, optimistic mindset, a measured, optimistic mindset, I believe that it really does pay dividends. I love the concept of what you said, Juice, where think about transferable skills. How can you make money in a time period where it's hard to land jobs in games? But know that that is still a part of the journey. That's still bringing you forward to a point where you're going to be making games once again. Never stop making games. Never lose the wonder. Never lose that connection to childhood. The game industry is one of the goofiest, most loving places that there is. And I will never leave it, despite how insane it can be. All right, I'm going to leave you all with that. Do your homework. Write me 1 paragraph about what keeps you optimistic, and tag us on Discord with it. Big love, everybody. We'll see you again next week.
Thank you.
And I wish you all very much luck. Absolutely.
Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you.
Adios.